Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As you can see, this meeting is going to be recorded, so just be mindful of that. But we're really excited to get you all to connect with Alyson Chen today, who was our 2022 Red Cross Red Crescent Youth Delegate at the statutory meetings. So really excited to get into all of that. But before we begin, I'd love to just introduce myself. So hi everyone, my name is Arthi Venkatakrishnan. I started around 5 years ago with the Red Cross in the New Jersey region. I just started out with my local youth council, where I eventually became a YAC advocate with them and did a lot of cool projects to end up representing the Northeast Division at the 2020 and 2021 National Summits for IHL. And in addition to that, I also got involved with my high school Red Cross Club, as well as my regional youth council, and eventually ended up working pretty heavily in volunteer services as now the vice chair of our National Youth Council. So in addition to that, on the IHL front, I'm now serving as one of our NH2 Youth Action Campaign interns. And just throughout all of it, I mean, if you're wondering how I got here and definitely how Alyson was able to get here, I can attest to the fact that both of us just kept pursuing Red Cross. We basically just took every available opportunity to engage with the Red Cross mission. And we continue to do that today. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Alyson to introduce herself.
Hi everybody, I'm Alyson. I am also the other Youth Action Campaign intern for the national headquarters. I started about 4 or 5 years ago as a volunteer in my own Red Cross club in my own region. I worked a lot with disaster services and international humanitarian law. So in around 2018, I'd say, I started my own team for the Youth Action Campaign. And then I was a lead and I led my own team, and I worked with a lot of youth NGOs and other teams across the globe. I'm based in San Francisco, so I'm from the Northern Coastal California region, but next year I'll be in the Southern California region. So I was a summit representative for the Pacific Division in the 2021 summit, in the 2021 Youth Action Campaign International Humanitarian Law Summit with Arthi. And then this year I am an intern and I became the 2022 Statutory Meetings Youth Delegate. So yeah, I'll hand it back to Arthi.
Thanks, Alyson. So first, what we're just going to start off with is, Alyson, if you could just tell us a little bit about what these statutory meetings are, what was your role in them? Just give us a little bit of background so we all have a bit of context on it.
So to let you guys know on what exactly the statutory meetings are, is that every 2 years, all the Red Crosses in the world, because each country has its own Red Cross, will send a couple representatives and a youth delegate to Geneva or some other designated location, and they'll meet together and talk about policies and how they want the Red Cross to be represented as a unit. So this year there was 2 adult delegates. Usually there are a couple more because of COVID, we had to limit it to 2. So there were 2 adult delegates and 1 youth delegate. So for me, when I was serving, I served with Kobe Langley and Byron Pollitt. And also for another part of the statutory meetings, I also had Alan Goldberg with me. So when I was at the meetings, we did a lot of policy. We talked a lot about policies about like climate change, war in cities, and civil agreements, which are big topics within the Red Cross. So they do a lot of voting for that, and they vote on their kind of perspectives on that. But to know that most of these decisions are pretty much pre-planned and negotiated with other Red Crosses beforehand. You can tell mostly because when we do actually vote for these policies, we kind of just clap. So it's not really like raising your hand. But for the most part throughout the meetings, people are giving comment on each of the policies and what their countries think. For example, each country has its own impact and are impacted differently by climate change and other things. And also, it is also just a really big celebration of all the Red Crosses like united together. So at that time, we also have medal ceremonies like the Henry Dunant Medal Ceremony and the Florence Nightingale Ceremony. So that also happens there. And just a quick breakdown that throughout the meetings, there are like the first 2-3 days are like the general assembly. So we mostly talk about making sure everyone's there and having some like formal, formal things that we do before actually getting started. And the next 2 to 3 days are the Council of Delegates, are when we actually vote for these policies. And then throughout these statutory meetings, there are bilateral meetings like during lunchtime or breakfast or anytime there's really free time. It's mostly one-on-one meetings or meetings with like a small number of countries to really talk to each other about working together or some sort of collaboration. But yeah, that's just a quick debrief of what exactly the statutory meetings are before I pass it back to Arthi.
Thanks, Alyson, for giving us that debrief. It definitely helps put some context into what you're doing. So at this point, we're really just going to open up to you all in the audience to ask questions. Of course, I have a couple prepared to ask Alyson to give you guys a little bit of a deeper peek into what her experience looked like. Unfortunately, we already have the first question. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can feel free to direct message me in the chat, put it in the general chat, or even raise your hand and we'll make sure to acknowledge you. The first question we have from the chat, which was direct messages to me, was, does every national society send a youth delegate? And if you met with other youth delegates, were there any that stood out in your memory or any that you're going to be staying in touch with?
Definitely for the second question, but let me get started to the first question. That yes, there are definitely, each country has a spot to send one youth delegate. Not all countries send a youth delegate. Sometimes they don't have the funding to or stuff like that. But the IFRC does have funding if you register beforehand, if they do want to send a youth delegate. But like I said, most do, but I'd say some don't. And also during the General Assembly, which is the first 2 to 3 days, we did have a lot of youth delegates, but for the Council of Delegates, which was 2 to 3 days after, some of them left because they had to go do something or they had to switch out, stuff like that. So like I said, some have youth delegates, I'd say most, but not all. And as for meeting with youth delegates, personally for us, I did meet with a lot of youth delegates being representing the United States, that a lot of people wanted to talk about some sort of collaboration or or just curious what the United States youth programs do. And so I did talk to so many different youth delegates about their different youth programs, because when I tell you that the American Red Cross has a very different youth system, so does every other country. Some have like their own chapter and some have so many different ways of structure. So I definitely got to talk with so many different people. And some that I'd stay in touch with, I definitely try to stay in touch with so many of them, because I've made so many like new friends and new connections during the statutory meetings that something I definitely want to stay in touch with are definitely like the countries that are nearby us, like countries in the Americas, in like Canada and Mexico and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely will try to keep in contact with everyone I do, with everybody I talk to, but that is a lot. So we'll see what happens with that.
Oh yeah, it's great that you're keeping in contact with a few that are close to us. It definitely sounds like you made a lot of great connections. So next question, I think I'm just going to take the Aria, you have your hand up. So if you want to just go off mute and ask Alyson your question.
Yeah. So my question was, how did you become a youth delegate?
Yeah, that's totally a question. That's a very interesting question, because even for me, I've definitely had my journey with the Red Cross. So really, it's just being really involved into the Red Cross and really knowing and really being like connected with it. For me, I just started from my school, and then I went to my region, and then it went bigger to like being involved in regional stuff, and then being involved in the Youth Action Campaign Summit, and things got nationally. So really, like, my involvement, just because of my curiosity, that I really wanted to like be a part of the IHL team. And so then eventually, after being a Youth Action Campaign representative in the summit last year, I just got more involved and became an intern with the national headquarters team. And I just literally 2-3 months ago, they just asked, hey, you want to be the representative for the statutory meetings this summer? I was like, yeah, I'm totally down. I freaking love international humanitarian law, and I'm so curious, and I just want to be more involved. So really, all I have to like tell you is to really know what you want to do with Red Cross, and really just continue your connection, continue like whether you volunteer for the Red Cross or whether you work for the Red Cross, to just stay involved and see where it gets you, because honestly, I never expected this for myself.
Yeah, definitely want to second Alyson's answer there. Just in general, your Red Cross experience is really what you make of it. So all of us has gotten like really cool opportunities. And if you're asking like why we got those or how we got those, it was really just because we stayed involved and we just, took all of those opportunities as stepping stones to something bigger. So it's really amazing what you can do with your Red Cross experience. But moving on to the next question, we have a question in the chat about how did youth delegates from other national societies regard the American Red Cross and the perspectives you shared from them?
So I have to be honest that when I talked to a lot of countries, they definitely had like their ideas of what they thought the American Red Cross is like. It's kind of like the UN that when you meet a lot of people, everyone has like ideas of the Red Cross. And obviously because we're like one of the biggest Red Crosses in the world, we do have a lot of funding and we do have a lot of things that, to be honest, that a lot of them came up to me asking like what we do with this many resources. And we really do like spread it around the world and work with a lot of different countries. So when they met me, they were honestly really surprised. As somebody who was Asian American, they didn't really expect me to be the statutory meetings representative. So I'm really glad that I was able to like kind of break down those stereotypes as somebody who was really involved in the Red Cross and especially in the international humanitarian law sector, that they were really surprised when they met me as the American Red Cross delegate. And then when oh, sorry, Arthi, can you repeat like the second half of that question?
Yeah, definitely. So the full question was just how did youth delegates from other national societies regard the American Red Cross and its perspectives that you shared with them?
So yeah, definitely, like I said, they were definitely surprised about the different types of youth programs we have in the US, like the Youth Action Campaign, because for a lot of countries, they have their own Red Cross and they're known for different things. Like some countries, the ambulances are run by the Red Cross, so definitely their youth have different things, especially since the Red Cross, because we have so many different youth programs, they were definitely very curious about like the expanse of all of them. Oh, and before I forget, there are some pictures here that I've met with other youth delegates. So this was like the first day, just exploring Geneva, and I'll just show you some pictures of the other youth delegates if my screen can load. But yeah, here are some pictures just with other youth delegates. If you're curious, it's a lot of hanging out and bonding and talking about different things. But yeah, we can move on to the next question.
Great, yeah, love the pictures. So I think you kind of touched upon this a little bit just now, but you talked about how just like you did a lot of bonding outside of the meetings. What else did you do outside of meetings with other youth delegates or just with anyone else that was there?
So outside of the official meetings and outside the official Council of Delegates and the official General Assembly, I did have a lot of, like I said, bilateral meetings talking about youth programs. For example, I think the picture on the top center, if you can see my mouse, was a bilateral meeting with Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. We're just talking about our different youth programs there. So I definitely had a lot of meetings, and the picture on the left right here is the meeting with the Americas. So these are the youth delegates, one from each country, from the Americas. So definitely had a lot of bilateral meetings talking about things with them. And then outside of that, we were just exploring Geneva. I think here we're just walking down to Old Town. I think over here we just hung out at Lake Geneva. So definitely it's not only just a professional relationship, but you really get to develop a social and a personal relationship with each of the delegates to really explore Geneva on our own, and definitely having a bond to really perpetuate like friendship and unity within the Red Cross. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. So we do have a couple more questions in the chat, and I just want to reiterate, if you do want to ask a question, feel free to direct message me, or you can be brave like Aria and just raise your hand and unmute when we call on you. But we want to keep those questions coming. So our next question is, what keeps you involved and motivated with the Red Cross over such a long period?
That's actually a really good question, because honestly, to be honest, it was just like my own curiosity. To be honest, when I started the Red Cross, I just was volunteering in San Francisco. We have like a lot of races and stuff like that, so I was just volunteering at races, and for me, I really love talking to people, so it was really a way to like keep connected with my own community. And And then when the opportunity arose to like join the Youth Action Campaign on international humanitarian law, I've always been somebody who was interested in international relations and business. So it really kept me curious, and I was wondering what that was. So I joined the team and I really got involved into what I was doing, and I really liked the topic of international humanitarian law. Not to pressure myself to actually like go into that field in the future, but I really loved having and keeping like these international connections, because even as somebody who was leading a youth action campaign only in San Francisco, I got to talk to so many different people across the US on their different youth action campaigns. And I even got to talk to like other youth organizations in other countries to talk about like what they thought of international law and stuff like that. So to me, I just really was curious and wanted to like have my own I just wanted to learn for myself, and also I just knew that this was a really good experience for myself to keep this going. And yeah, I just wanted the experience, and I knew that in the future I would really have appreciated my younger self for doing that. But yeah, that's it for me.
All right, yeah, I really like your answer to that, mostly because I just resonate with a lot of the same sort of sentiments there. Definitely Summit is a really special time of the year just because, like you said, we get to meet people from all over the country and advocates from military bases on totally different continents. Even though the time zones are a little hard to work out, it's definitely all worth it, just with the people that you meet and the experiences you get to have. So this one's a little bit more logistical, but definitely still an important question. What was the age range of the different youth delegates?
That's a really good question. So the youth delegates across the Red Cross in the world, for the statutory meetings, the age limit was ages 18 to 30. I'm not sure if it changed to 30 to 31, but yes, so technically a lot of the youth delegates I met were around the age of like 26 to 27. So throughout the meetings, I was the youngest youth delegate there because I am 18. So I was just at the youngest brink of it. So definitely at the meetings, you'll meet a variety of ages, but a lot of the times the people who are there are actually youth staff and youth coordinators in their own country. So they range around the age of like maybe 26 to 27. They're definitely younger, and they're definitely that are older. But yeah, that's the logistics of the ages there.
All right, yeah, awesome. It's good to note that youth in American Red Cross means something totally different internationally. So while we think of them as below 18, it's obviously you can hear from Alyson's answer that it is not quite that internationally speaking. But the next question, I love this question. How did this experience help you with other experiences outside of the Red Cross?
So for me, in college, I'll be pursuing business and international relations. So my experience at the Red Cross, really like digging into international law and really meeting so many different people, definitely helped me with like international relations and really being able to talk professionally to a lot of people outside of this. Outside the Red Cross, I'm involved in some policy stuff within San Francisco and other stuff. So I definitely got to talk to them about like international law, and they're always like, how are you involved in that? You're literally 18 and in San Francisco. And the Red Cross really helps me with that, and really pushes me to have international connections, and really pushes me to have these opportunities to work with people from across the country and across the globe. So it really helps me outside of my life in the Red Cross to really have these experiences to talk about.
That's awesome. So next question is, what was your perspective of the meetings, before you went, any expectations you built, and then how did that change after you went?
So before the meetings, I definitely didn't know what the statutory meetings were. I was definitely very involved in the Red Cross, but I didn't know what the statutory meetings were. So from somebody who didn't know what they were, I just thought, oh my God, this is literally like the United Nations, where it's going to be so professional. It's going to be really intimidating. And to be honest, it was a little bit. But before, I was given a gigantic briefing book with all the policies, everything that happened. So I definitely felt more confident going into the statutory meetings. I do have another delegate that I met. He actually printed out the entire briefing book. So it was literally this like wide, and they had to read through the entire thing. So for me, I was like, oh my God, this is so much. I'm a little scared, but I'm honestly like so interested in it. So when I got to statutory meetings, it was honestly like the UN. I think you can see in one of the photos that they have a little plaque of all the they have a plaque of each of the countries, and it's in French, like the UN, and all the countries have like their own table throughout it. So even though it was really professional and you did have to like talk about policies and really listen into it, I honestly loved it, and it's a lot more. It is professional, but you get to talk to so many countries, and you get to make like a lot of these connections, a lot of these friendships. So on some level, it is a little informal because you get to talk to so many different people. You don't necessarily have to talk about the Red Cross or policies that are happening, or basically you can talk about their day, you can talk about anything. And it's honestly really weird to talk to them unprofessionally in a way, and that I really got to have a fun time. So after the statutory meetings, not only do I like value it as a very like an amazing professional experience, but I also see it as like such an amazing way to connect with people and to build friendships, and stuff like that.
I think that's a great point. I think there's a lot to really gain from this experience. And speaking of things that you've gained from this experience, I mean, I think you've touched upon plenty so far, but was there anything else that you feel that you gained from the meetings?
Like I said, from the meetings, I definitely gained so many professional connections, and so much honestly information on other Red Crosses, on like how we can like better the American Red Cross youth system, or how other youth systems want to like connect with the American Red Cross. So definitely building these international connections with other countries, really learning and having this knowledge about really this wider American Red Cross, sorry, not American, this wider Red Cross experience, that I really gained the knowledge of how other countries work and how different that they are from us, and having these, how different they are from the American Red Cross. So yeah, what I gained was definitely those connections, and definitely like an open door to anything. Like if they need anything, they'd ask if they're like curious about an American Red Cross program, or if I'm curious about what they have and what resources they have. It's definitely building these relationships and connections.
Yeah, thanks for answering that question. So the next question is going to be a little bit different. It's going to take a little bit of a turn. But what surprised you the most about the meetings, your experience leading up to them, during them, maybe even after them?
Yeah, what surprised me was, I mean, the first initial surprise was definitely the age gap between me and the other delegates, because they were definitely surprised. They were surprised, I was surprised. It was definitely a whole thing. But after that, I was definitely surprised about how much of these meetings are actually like pretty much pre-planned. Like I said, we clap when we vote. That's definitely not a way to really vote for something, but it's definitely because there were meetings beforehand that really talked out the issues and the word of the phrase of everything. So when we clap, it's how we vote. And when people comment, it was definitely interesting and surprising to hear like how differently these policies impact these sorry, how these policies react to how these policies react differently to other countries. For example, like climate change affects other countries in the world differently than the United States. And even though the United States has a big thing for climate change, especially the youth in America have a really like a solid and big stance against climate change. Definitely for other countries that they are actually like impacted by climate change. Every day they see it, and so every single day we see all of the ways that. So what surprised me was the way that each of the youth were very vocal about what they want and what they have at these statutory meetings. Sorry if that was a little unclear.
No, I think that was honestly articulated very well. So you did mention climate change is kind of one of the issues that was brought up. And of course, moving into this next fiscal year, we're looking towards a new campaign theme of climate change and displacement. So I'm wondering how the statutory meetings maybe help shape your understanding of that issue, or just anything else that you think you kind of took out of the meetings that might be helpful for this upcoming year.
So for this upcoming year, definitely we go through so many different policies. There's, when you're at the meetings, like there's policy after policy of like whether that's the civil agreement or war in cities, or climate change, that we definitely get to hear the perspectives of so many different countries on what their perspectives are on these particular policies. And for the American Red Cross, we definitely commented on some of them. And regarding the fiscal school year, that not school year, fiscal year. I don't really know how that could affect the fiscal year, but I know that definitely that it could see as different. We do have different priorities. For example, like I know personally for the Youth Action Campaign that are we're definitely valuing climate change within the next year. So definitely having this experience at the statutory meetings that we have so many different types of policies and how this could help the American Red Cross and help the American Red Cross youth in these having different focuses and how these countries and how these foreign countries can definitely help regarding their own resources towards these topics, whether that may be like disaster services or blood services and stuff like that. So definitely these various lines of services.
Definitely, yeah. I think everything that you've done in this meeting or in these meetings, just amazing work, because it really does transcend IHL and just international services in general. So one question that we do have is, how do you think the policies that were implemented in Geneva improved the Red Cross? And can you give an example of a policy that you liked or you agreed with?
Personally for me, I definitely got to saw like the unity of the Red Cross, because a lot of the time that a lot of people may think of the Red Cross as just the Red Cross, and that it might all be just this one big organization in the world. I think somebody mentioned once to me that they're like, oh yeah, like I donated this X amount of money to the Red Cross. And then we're like, we didn't receive that money. You donated that to like some other Red Cross. And a lot of times that each Red Cross has its own priorities and has its own policies of what they want. For example, like different countries like Germany and France and Austria have their own priorities, have their own systems. So it's definitely so different, and sometimes sometimes it's very different, and you look at a different country, go, wow, that's so crazy. But at the statutory meetings, you really got to see like the unity, and since one of the principles of the Red Cross is unity, you really got to see like every 2 years this like one meeting where you get to see every single one of them really like bonding with each other, really creating policies with each other, and really connecting with each other to create this one sort of meeting to create these policies of how they want the Red Cross to be represented within the next 2 years before the next statutory meetings. And then for me, I'd say one of the policies that I liked, besides the one this might be kind of irrelevant to the actual really important ones, but I'll mention another one. But the one thing that each of the youth delegates were here for was to actually vote for a youth representative for the Africa region in the Youth Commission. So in the Global Youth Commission, there are 2 representatives from each region. So for the Africa region, there are 2 representatives, and one of them needs to be re-elected. One of them needs to be elected, period. So during that time, I got to hear from so many different youth delegates talking about stances of youth empowerment and how we value youth in the world, because definitely one of the biggest sources of volunteers is youth, in no matter in what country that we make up so much of that. That it was definitely so amazing to hear the different perspectives and the different opinions of youth speaking out about how important youth voice is in the Red Cross. But yeah, let me know if I missed something.
Yeah, I think you covered that question really well. And speaking of just like the role of youth in other countries, what sort of things were other youth in other countries involved in, whether just in their volunteerism or otherwise in their respective Red Cross societies?
Like I said, each Red Cross has its own priorities. For example, when you think of the American Red Cross, you think disaster services, blood services, stuff like that. But in other countries, they have such a different system where some countries have like their own chapter in their own country designated towards youth. For example, in the American Red Cross, youth is under volunteer services. So it's very different. It's a very broadening to hear that they have their own sort of system. And even in other countries that they have their own programs. For example, I know even in Canada, they have a youth action program similar to the US. And I know in other countries that they prioritize things like running their ambulances, or even in those countries that are third world countries that have conflict, that a lot of their youth are involved in the actual conflict and the actual like medical services of the Red Cross, such as Ukraine and such as places like Lebanon, that the youth there have priorities that are very different, and youth that have the responsibilities that are so different from the Red Cross, from the American Red Cross.
All right, yeah, thank you for answering that. So just moving on to our next question, how do you think your experience, and I think we again sort of touched upon this already, but feel free to elaborate, but how do you think your experience at these meetings influenced your view of the American Red Cross?
So as somebody who is involved in, mostly I'm based in San Francisco in California, and I'm virtually working in DC, it's kind of weird to remember that the American Red Cross is involved in so many different things, and that we fund so many different countries, like the Philippines and other countries, that we impact, and we give so much money to other countries to help them with their own disaster services and to help with climate change, that for me, I really got to see the perspective that the American Red Cross is involved with so many countries and is involved with so many different lines of service, because sometimes you forget that a lot of times that we are very Americentric in how we think, and very Americentric in our programs, that we forget that the American Red Cross is already involved in so many different countries and so many different things, that it's great to have like this international perspective and really physically be able to see and physically able to meet so many of these international connections at the statutory meetings.
Yeah, I feel like the meetings that you have are very eye-opening in that sense. So it's awesome. So kind of looking towards the future now, I think you maybe give a little bit of context first on just like when the next meetings are, if there are certain topics that are being addressed there that you know of already, and just kind of what that's going to look like.
So in the future, I do know that there are statutory meetings every 2 years. However, for whether this is information for you guys or for the next youth delegate, that the next statutory meetings will actually have government ambassadors from each country. I know that the statutory meetings I went to is like the second most important meeting in the Red Cross, because every 2 years we have statutory meetings, but every other statutory meetings, government ambassadors are there. So next time, I know that they're probably going to be very much more impacting policies. For me, I can't tell you if what policies are going to be there, but yeah, it's going to be, I just know that it's going to be on a much higher level because governments are going to get involved. And it's going to probably be a really big statutory meetings, because hopefully by then COVID will not have such a enormous impact on what we did. So for this statutory meetings, they were only going to do two adult delegates, but the Global Youth Commission fought for having a youth delegate there. So hopefully next time there will be even more youth delegates. And this is more logistical, but I do know every 2 years, it doesn't always happen in Geneva, but the next one will be in Geneva. Usually the host country will alternate, but next year we'll be in Geneva. 2 years from now, we'll be in Geneva again with government ambassadors, probably involving much more bigger issues than what I saw at these meetings.
All right, yeah, thanks for putting a bit of context to all of that. So you have a question that asks, is the youth delegate position something that's renewable?
So I do know a couple youth delegates, them having it be like their second time going, or even I think I saw a youth delegate where it was like their fifth time going. But to be honest, I don't know if I'm gonna, like, if you ask me, would you go to the next one? 100%, I'd be down to go to Geneva again. I'd be freaking amazed. But like I said, I'm pretty sure that by the next 2 years, it might be somebody else on maybe the National Youth Council, or maybe somebody else on the Youth Action Campaign, that it really isn't a definitive position to be like, I'm going to be the next one in 2 years. It's definitely, there's probably gonna be more planning into it and more planning into who it's gonna be. I literally can't tell you who it's gonna be next and how they're gonna pick it, because I personally have no clue. But technically I could serve again, but again, I'm pretty sure it would be somebody else passing on the opportunity. So it is possible for youth delegates to serve again, but again, the way they choose the youth delegate is not very definitive.
Thanks for, I guess, giving as much information as possible that you could have on that question. And I think that really the message that it's sending is a lot of us in the audience, whether we're YAC advocates or just other youth volunteers, a lot of us, are kind of possibly eligible for this sort of thing should you continue to deepen your Red Cross involvement, especially in IHL. So it's interesting to think about. But we do have a good question in the chat just to clarify, were any of the non-youth representatives volunteers?
Non-youth, well, some of the youth were actually paid staff, but the actual adult representatives, I'd say most of them were like presidents of like their Red Cross. So like, for example, they're in charge of the entire Red Cross. So I'd say for the most part, they are paid staff. However, I'm sure in the hundreds of people there are probably a couple that are actually volunteer adults. Oh, actually, for the American Red Cross, the two besides Kobe Langley, the two other representatives were actually volunteers, because I know that Byron Pollitt and Alan Goldberg, that a lot of times they volunteer their time working in other countries, and they volunteer their time working for the American Red Cross. So yeah, there are definitely some that are volunteers and definitely some that are paid staff. So I definitely admire them if they're volunteers, because being a part of the Red Cross is definitely a large responsibility, especially going to the statutory meetings.
Definitely second that last thing that you just said. I think now that we're kind of on the topic of just thinking about, who the next youth delegate can be, who can go to these sorts of things, and especially considering, again, like our audience members, it could be one of you guys. We don't know yet, but what advice would you give to the next youth delegate?
I have so much advice for the next youth delegate. Is one, it just so happened that I am a person that loves to talk to people. I love talking to people. I love learning from people. But the next youth delegate also has to be that type of person that will approach people, that will talk to people. Don't be somebody that you need to be approached by to talk to, but be somebody who you will go talk to people, because it's definitely not an event to be an introvert at. It's definitely an event where you talk to people, where you make connections. And I'm sure the next youth delegate will have a lot more time to prepare for the statutory meetings, because for me, they just announced that each of the countries would be allowed to bring in youth delegates about like 2 to 3 months before the actual meetings. But for the next meetings, I'm sure there's going to be some ample time. So definitely learn about those policies. Think about how you want to connect the American Red Cross youth to those policies. Maybe you have like a time to comment for them, stuff like that. But definitely work with people like the National Youth Council, who are in charge of the youth, who represent the youth in this country, to really talk about like their priorities, and really be the person to really advocate for youth policies in American Red Cross, and definitely be the person to really talk to other countries and learn about their youth programs, so you can come back into the US and really kind of like information dump all like everything that you learned, to really see how you can improve the American Red Cross youth system, and make these connections with other countries, so that you have these relationships, so that in the future, if you have some sort of project or some sort of proposal to work with these countries on like programs, or just you want to talk to them or something, that the gateway is there for you, and to really have these connections that you make, not only for yourself, but make these connections for the American Red Cross youth in general.
I think that's amazing advice, and I'm sure a lot of our audience members feel the same way. So another question that we do have is, how do you go about volunteering in other countries? I'm assuming that's applying to just their Red Cross/Red Crescent societies, but just generally, like, how are you able to help out all around the world?
So definitely you can there is the opportunity to like work with countries or just have like the information there for them or stuff like that. I do know that if you're just like somebody who's in a region and wants to talk to somebody, definitely try to like get in contact with your National Youth Council or get in contact with like your regional board, because if it is a little if you like contact them as like a decentralized part of the United States, you can't really talk for the entire American Red Cross youth. So definitely if you talk to people like the National Youth Council, and you talk to some like people higher up in your region, that you'll have access to all of these resources, and you'll have more access to like these opinions and like what stances are on things, so that if you really do want to work with other countries in the future on some sort of project, definitely be sure to have those connections with like the upper division Red Cross youth, just so you have those resources. So in the future, if you want to, I said this before, but if you have some sort of project, definitely contact your higher ups before you do that.
Definitely some good information. And then I do see we have a hand raised from Diana, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Hello. I just wanted to know, were you the only youth delegate from the American Red Cross, or were you just the youth delegate from your region? I'm not sure if you went over this already, but I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, no problem. I was the only youth delegate representing the American Red Cross. So for each country, they get one youth delegate. So for me, I represented the entire American Red Cross as the youth delegate.
Okay, thank you.
Great, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. We do have another question from the chat about just, and I know you've kind of gone over this already, but if you just want to reiterate your answer here, just what was the process of you becoming the youth delegate for the United States?
So like I said, it was definitely surprising to me, but to be honest, if I were to give advice, just really be involved in your Red Cross. For me, I started as, I'm going to reiterate again if you weren't here for the beginning, but I was just at my high school volunteering for races and stuff like that before I got involved in like my regional stuff, where like disaster services committee, or like the International Humanitarian Youth Action Campaign. Then I got involved in like stuff like that, and I was really passionate about that sort of thing, to really like make those connections as somebody on the Youth Action Campaign, to make connections with other people in the country, and make connections with even non-governmental organizations in foreign countries. That for me, I wanted to build those connections. And then when I was in the regional level, the opportunity of the IHL Youth Action Campaign Summit came along, and I applied, and I was one of the Pacific division representatives for that. So then I got involved in national things, and then as one of the Pacific division representatives, I became more involved, and during the school year I became an intern for the national headquarters team, where I did a lot of like development, where I developed a lot of like curriculum for them, like campaign initiatives and toolkits and stuff like that, and really preparing for even the next summit this year in DC that's going to be happening in like a week from now, that I was really involved in like the national one. So for me, my involvement just became deeper of going into it, that for me, I just chased like my own curiosity, and I chased my own like passion to be involved in the Red Cross. So for me, it just kept on going. And then after that, I was asked to be the youth delegate from the national headquarters team, and I said yes, and here I am. So that was kind of my journey into becoming the youth delegate for the American Red Cross.
Yeah, really just, I mean, chasing your own curiosity is a really good attitude to be taking towards Red Cross volunteering, or really anything in life. So it's great that you said that. Kind of one of our last questions here, did you help write any of the policies, or were you only just voting on them?
I was not somebody who wrote the policies. That's definitely done by the adults, and done by pre-prepared by like the IFRC, the ICRC. So this is definitely like higher than even like the American Red Cross, that they write those policies. I'm sure that if you really do your research, and if you really like gain those connections, that you can try to get involved into the IFRC and the ICRC and the American Red Cross. And even I know there's a team in the American Red Cross that helps with like developing these opinions and policies that the American Red Cross has. So yeah, I'm sure that there is a team, and that that it's a different than as the youth delegate. I definitely don't have enough time. There's not like a notification time. The policies are already developed before the youth delegate is chosen, if that makes sense. But I'm sure that if you're on like another team in the American Red Cross helping develop those opinions, that I'm sure that there is some sort of way there to help with those policies. But as the youth delegate this year, I did not. However, I did vote on most of these policies. But again, like I said, voting is clapping. So clapping was my specialty as I voted. So yeah, that was basically how I voted. The one time that we did actually vote was when we voted for the IFRC leadership, was actually like an online platform which we picked which candidate we wanted for the president. But again, those opinions are pretty much pre-planned to the research. So, but I did get to technically clap for those votes. And for the youth representative for the Africa region, I did actually get to vote for that. But again, there's only one candidate for that. So if you think that's voting, I agree.
I think we'll consider it voting, can avoid technicalities there. But we do have one more question, which Kim put in the chat. It's a goofy question, but I think it's perfect to end off kind of our Q&A here. I know many disaster responders love trading regional pins where they deploy. So is pin trading also a big deal there? And if so, did you get any really unique pins?
I cannot, okay. I swear, let's see if I can find it in this bag here. But I was given a bag load of pins, and so was a lot of other countries. And so when I say I have a new collection of pins, I am so proud of that collection. Let me tell you. I have it actually right here. That like we each get like a security badge to get in. Oh crap, sorry, dropped one. But we each get like a security badge to get in. Sorry, this is my actually security photo. And on that like chain, I have so many pins from so many. I think my lighting's pretty bad right now. But I have pins from like a lot of different countries, like Australia, Malaysia, Egypt, Philippines, stuff like that. So I probably have like 20 plus pins from trading all the planes that we had. I don't know if I have a picture here, but oh, you can probably see it right here. That on my neck, this was like the setup I had, that I had like a translation device. If they were ever speaking like Spanish, Arabic, or like French, that I had a translation device on my head that would translate it to English. And then on my neck, I had like all of these pins, and I am so proud of my collection. It is something I will keep forever and bring it everywhere I go. Because let me tell you, I'm so proud of my pin collection of all things, and it's definitely a great souvenir because it represents like all the countries I was able to talk to. And we definitely all traded pins, and we all have like our own collection of pins from each of the countries. So yeah.
Honestly, you should be proud of your pin collection. So to all my fellow pin collectors out there, this is definitely your calling. But I think we can transition over to some closing remarks, that Alyson and I both have just regarding just the impact of her attending these meetings. So the first is just the impact of youth in general when it comes to international relations, IHL, just anything in that realm. So I introduced myself at the beginning of the event as someone who's stepping in as the vice chair of the National Youth Council. And really what we're working towards is building and leveraging more of those international connections. So I've been on calls with some Asian Red Cross Society, Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, I should say. And a lot of it is just about learning like what they do with their youth and then bringing it back to our American Red Cross work. At the same time, the National Youth Council is working towards further promoting IHL. We have a ton of new council members that we just onboarded that have some great experience in IHL throughout just all youth channels, because as we do keep expanding the Youth Action Campaign, this is something that all youth can get involved in, and young adult volunteers as well. But really just the main takeaway from this, just from a youth volunteerism standpoint, is being able to take passion in your volunteering. There's a lot of great points that Alyson hit on, and just getting more and more involved with Red Cross to get amazing opportunities like this that obviously, affect you inside Red Cross, but also outside of Red Cross, set you up for, professional opportunities in the future, or just, give you something that you're interested in, that you get to be excited about. And I do want to emphasize that getting involved with IHL, international relations, really anything there, doesn't necessarily equate to a career in that field. So I know Alyson mentioned she's going to pursue business at USC, and it's going to be kind of tied into international relations. For me personally, I'm also pursuing business this coming fall, and I'm not really going to be, studying international relations very heavily, but still my experience with IHL, with these summits, with congressional briefings, other cool opportunities that you get once you deepen your Red Cross involvement, all of that have just sharpened my leadership skills, public speaking, all of that. And it's just given me really invaluable experiences that just apply no matter what field I end up going into. So I can definitely speak to just no matter what your career plans are, and they might not even exist, but getting involved with IHL really is just, it's amazing. It's definitely something you should consider and just keep deepening your involvement with.
Yeah, I definitely want to second what Arthi says. I might be a little bit of a hypocrite because I am going into business and international relations. I'm going into a program where I'll be studying in the US, Asia, and Europe. But I do want to really emphasize that it's not just about international relations, that I did learn so much about IHL and so much about international law, but I developed so many skills like creating like this curriculum or doing so many like building so many connections and stuff like that, that it's not just international relations, that you do develop many skills that can apply in so many different fields, that I really encourage you to be involved in, not only like Youth Action Campaign, not only IHL, but so many lines of service, because you can gain so much experience that aren't directly involved in the field that you're involved in. And then moving on to, really get and then what really youth can do is that, like I said before, that really be active and be aware in your Red Cross community what's going on and how maybe you can get involved in that, and really being open-minded to what you can do for the Red Cross, because it's not only just volunteering of your contribution to the Red Cross, but also what the Red Cross can do to you. Because for me, it like gave me access to so many of these resources, so many of these connections. Like I said, that the Red Cross isn't just some sort of organization where you volunteer for like the farmers market or volunteer for like the race nearby, that it's so much more than that, and that you can get involved in so much more than disaster services, that there's such a wide range of opportunities offered by the Red Cross, that really being aware and really being active and really getting like deepening your connections with the Red Cross community can really help. And lastly, having really an international mindset, that what the topics that we talk about and the topics that you might be thinking of don't necessarily have to be within the US, but being aware that it also impacts other countries. But like I said, if you ever want to reach out to some sort of international organization or international Red Cross community, make sure that you talk to like your upper division, NYC, National Youth Council, me, or some sort of upper division, so that you have access and you have a greater perspective on these resources and these opinions. But yeah, that's what youth can do. But yeah, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me, and then I'll pass it back to Arthi for wrapping it up.
All right, yeah, thanks. I really just want to second everything that Alyson said on the previous slide. We do, as youth volunteers, have a tremendous amount of power, more than we realize. And so it's important for us to get involved in issues that not only affect our country, but other countries as well. So just kind of moving on to the next slide, where we've kind of spotlighted the rest of our YAC Summit series this month. Super exciting stuff. I do kind of want to draw your attention to a couple of the upcoming ones. First, I did mention that, a lot of my IHL experience has just really helped me develop my leadership skills. And I think tomorrow and the day after, the 2-day intensive leadership boot camp we've got going on is a perfect example of that. So we really hope you'll join that. We've got, as you can see, a ton of events just spotlighting different areas of IHL, whether that's restoring family links or, protecting the environment. And then we've also got some national presentations where you can see the work of different advocates and what they've been able to accomplish this year with the whole theme of preserving cultural property. And then another one that I kind of quickly just want to give a shout out to is exactly what I was talking about in the previous slide, about how you don't necessarily have to be going into international relations or law school or any of that to be involved in IHL. It can take you in so many different routes. And the 27th, when we've got our career panel, just about where IHL can take you, is a really great opportunity to explore those sort of nooks and crannies of what your future career can look like, what your future passions can look like now that you've gotten involved in IHL. And of course, we are ending off the month with just a fun Harry Potter IHL event, kind of a classic here at Summit. So we really hope you're gonna join as many of these as you can, really soak up all of the IHL that we're gonna be talking about, but also all of the leadership that we're gonna help you guys build. And then just moving towards the next slide here. We do just encourage you guys, of course, to get involved in IHL in any way possible. If you couldn't tell already from Alyson and I both, promoting this rigorously. So we do have a blog, which you can see on the screen, but you can get involved if you're an adult or if you're a youth through our adult dissemination program or through the youth action campaigns. We've got links for both of those on the slide. And just feel free to contact us at any time. So that can mean if you're curious about the youth action campaign, you can contact ihlyouth@redcross.org. And both Alyson and I have put our email on there in case you want to talk about some of the opportunities that we've been able to get involved in because of IHL, or just anything else. We're very open to, just helping you guys figure out where Red Cross journey will take you. But with that, we want to thank you guys for attending. Certainly stay on if you have further questions or you can just go ahead and just email those. But thank you all for joining, and thank you for Alyson for sharing your experience.
Thank you.